Okay, but what do you think? Overwatch is a game with a vast array of knowledge. Like any great and bountiful game, the possibilities are virtually endless. There are so many different ways to look at the game, and it is constantly changing and evolving. The result is a tumultuous ocean of knowledge and opinion about the best ways to play. There are a few hard and fast rules, but to me, a lot of the knowledge is highly circumstantial. There's simply too much going on at one time to teach players what to do in every scenario. At some point, they must rely on their experience, their natural intelligence. As discussed in a previous video, I personally feel that Overwatch is a game where chance and skill have equal say on the outcome of a match. For example, you could be the best DPS player in the lobby by stats, but your method of attack may be ill-suited for the kind of war that your team is waging. Meaning, you could 100% lose to a DPS player with half of your mechanical skill simply because they wage a better war than you. War is a blend of tactics, execution, and reaction across multiple battles, not just one. The conscious force guiding those tactics and reactions in a split-second scenario is your natural intelligence. I define natural intelligence in this context as that aspect of consciousness that grows directly from your experience. Not just concepts, experience. Without experience, it doesn't grow. So the concept alone isn't enough to actually strengthen your connection to your natural intelligence. A wise enemy will absolutely use that to their advantage in war. Sometimes that war is from a distance, where your team attempts to control a wide area from a relatively safe place, otherwise known as poke. Sometimes that war is up close and personal, with massive bursts of damage all at once and a swift escape, otherwise known as dive. Most wars are a chaotic mix of the two, a brawl, and the style may change entirely within a couple seconds, rapidly oscillating between styles and phases with every shot fired and with every ability used. I personally describe it as a delicate dance of fate, and the ecstasy of learning the steps to this dance is why I'm even talking to you right now. I want to share that ecstasy with you. The ecstasy of learning in a society that no longer values such an essential process of being human. Society as we know it isn't designed to enhance our connection to our natural intelligence. If anything, it appears to be designed to keep us far from it. As such, it is indeed an act of resistance to reclaim this intelligence and to actively train it. But if we do, we will surely find that nothing is truly beyond our reach. So where do we start? Culture. One of the dumbest aspects of American culture is the widespread fear of looking stupid, of being wrong, of losing, as though it's some indictment of your worth for the rest of your life. It's absurd. Success is a process that includes losing, learning, and starting over, all in the public eye most times. Like many of the moronic things we do culturally, I think the widespread cultural aversion to the process of learning originated from a group of loud, egomaniacal morons with a ton of influence over public perception at some point in history. The lifestyle and personality of a complete douche somehow became the status quo, and somewhere along the path of unlimited moronic douchery, we discovered the harebrained idea of ridiculing people for trying to learn things and for not knowing things, as if this isn't our default state, as if it isn't a crucial part of the human condition, as if the whole point of this time on Earth isn't to learn and experience new things. For fear of looking dumb, it is culturally all too common to never actually learn anything. We just find the nearest person who claims they have, then we ask them everything like a child stuck in their Y phase. as though their knowledge alone will make us like them, completely ignoring the part where we apply and test it for ourselves. And so, the blind lead the blind as far as the eye can see. Overwatch, like any other MOBA style game, has an immense amount of depth, and thus an immense amount of knowledge, especially when you're first picking up the game. You don't start out with the ability to contextualize all the readily available information into actionable steps. I used to do it with League back in high school. I'd spend half the session reading a guide about a build I would never actually complete because I was never going to get enough gold. Meanwhile, I couldn't last hit to save my life and I had no concept of what to do between fights. Probably would have served me a lot more to just log in, get wrecked, and draw my own conclusions from my experience until I got used to existing in the game, but no. I drowned in a sea of patch notes and hot takes to such a depth that I never actually found my way out. That changed with Overwatch for me, and I'd like to do my part in keeping Overwatch players out of the sunken place. That place where information overload meets delusional ego. That place that completely cuts us off from the magic of learning, of critical thinking, of self-actualization, of community. Think of this video as a little life raft in the tumultuous sea that is Overwatch. This raft helped me find my home in that sea, a place where I can ride the waves with growing joy and skill no matter what happens. As always, these words transcend the game of Overwatch. They apply to the game of life too. And I want the best for you, whatever that looks like, in life and in Overwatch. The ability to refine and ultimately trust your judgment will set you apart in ways that will confound your enemies for the rest of their days. But in order to do that, like all things, we must learn to truly see for ourselves, to hear, think, and speak for ourselves. We must find and channel the courage to test our ideas rigorously. We must be open to knowledge that exceeds our own and accept the gift of its application. As stated in a previous video, though the ocean of knowledge in Overwatch is vast, as a game, the goal is always simple and clear. Use whatever you've got to win. Some of us in the Overwatch community have conflated our personal opinions or those of our favorite streamers with rules that every player should follow. For instance, we've all heard the idea of Counterwatch, where players constantly swap to characters with a favorable matchup to keep from losing. The general consensus is that this is a bad habit to get into. I agree, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't swap in certain contexts. There are certainly limits to how far swapping to your enemy's weakness will get you. At some point, you'll have to just sit down and learn how to play into your hero's weaknesses. But this isn't always the right choice either. The right choice comes down to you. It comes down to your judgment, your assessment of the circumstances of your team's war. Unfortunately, many of us are taught to disregard our experience from a young age. We're given a list of rules we must follow and never question. In an instant, our judgment and our natural curiosity are slain. We're taught immediately to rely on the judgment of other people simply because they're older, regardless of what we see and what we feel. We are taught to conflate age with wisdom, the same way we are taught to conflate someone's income with their value as a person, or, God forbid, their morality. That's not to say that there aren't rules we should follow. There are plenty of rules in society, spoken and unspoken, that serve each of us immensely. This video is about where it doesn't serve us. And it doesn't serve us when reclaiming and training our natural intelligence. It doesn't serve us in the way of sharpening our sense of judgment. In fact, it often coerces us to give it up entirely. That judgment is our anchor in the tumultuous sea of life. In exchange for giving up this judgment, this birthright we all have, we are rewarded with a sense of belonging, an identity handpicked by the group rather than oneself. We are groomed to give up this anchor and to let it sink out of sight. We are groomed to tether ourselves to the ideology of the loudest, most invasive voices, and most importantly, to never question them. We receive far less resistance to our ideas and even support in some cases, as long as we don't color too far outside the lines of the group. So it's not all that surprising that so many players are simply towing the line of the loudest voices in the Overwatch community, often parroting phrases and ideas that aren't their own just to fit in, just to stave off the burden of failure. Meanwhile, the whole group is too afraid to make a play, too afraid to test the boundaries of the meta for themselves. Too many of us are too afraid of actual experience to even begin to tap into our natural intelligence. And so the cycle continues. The blind lead the blind as far as the eye can see. As always, life itself is no different. We must work with the basic pieces of foundational knowledge before we can carve our own unique path successfully. Notice how I said we must work with the basic pieces of foundational knowledge. It is not enough to just read it or hear it. It must be made manifest in some way. It needs to exist in your bones, in your muscles. You must integrate that knowledge into your being. It must become your natural state. How do we do that? We tap into our courage. Get out there and we test that knowledge. We gain experience. We see for ourselves what applies and what doesn't. Modern society is constructed to mold us into beings that perpetuate its existence. It's constructed for efficient control, not our individual highest good. And it must do this, or else it will naturally fracture back into something that looks like untouched nature. Oh, and we can't have that. No, we can't have the very conditions likely responsible for our existence today again. No. We must ensure that every single one of us thinks the exact same way about everything. And if we don't, that's bad. And if you keep walking this dangerous path of critical thinking, you'll end up with actually free thinkers exchanging and refining their ideas, beliefs, and personalities amongst themselves. You'll have an informed and connected populace where everyone leans into their natural gifts, which will then speed up an endless feedback loop of progress, self-knowledge, and community. What a horrible scenario. Thankfully, most of us are caught up fighting with one another over knowledge we never actually sought for ourselves. So we're attacking people that would otherwise be our greatest allies over irrelevant differences in opinion. And we found a way to destroy the joy of learning for everyone involved by turning opinions into personalities and waging war with one another 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, bots included. Perfect. Despite this delightful state of affairs, I do believe the way out is actually quite simple. First, we must remember that no matter how much knowledge we acquire, it doesn't provide us with any value if we are unable or unwilling to apply it. Next, we must accept and embrace being wrong, which I don't feel is the right word for that state we enter into when we realize a choice we've made wasn't the best. Instead of viewing it as a permanent state of being and a destiny, embrace that it's an indicator of potential growth in the moment. When we discover that something doesn't work, we gain knowledge of an outcome. That knowledge alone doesn't provide us any value whatsoever if we don't then apply that knowledge to the next set of choices we must make. The worst part is that if we're so caught up trying not to look bad in front of others that we actually never do apply that knowledge and test it for ourselves, we guarantee not only that we'll look bad, we'll actually be bad. we lose twice. We lose the match and the chance to learn why. We never apply the knowledge of our failures to our strategy because we can't even accept that we failed. That's the sunken place. That place where information overload meets delusional ego. We've all visited from time to time. You can feel it in the air. Those lobbies from hell where a teammate won't shut up about something they clearly know nothing about and slowly wear down another teammate who finally explodes and the whole ship inevitably sinks because no one wants to accept failure. No one wants to learn. They just want to be seen as someone who knows. And thus the cycle continues again. The blind lead the blind as far as the eye can see. What I'm saying is that we must have the courage to open our eyes and use them earnestly. We must embrace that we will discover all the ways we've got it backward. We must see that as the wonderful blessing that it is. It is a gateway to evolution. When we shut our eyes to this, we cut ourselves off from it. We must test the knowledge we acquire for ourselves rigorously if we're to gain the infinite advantage of judgment. A refined sense of judgment in a game like Overwatch can bridge the gap between skill levels like nothing else can. Much like mental fortitude, judgment is also a muscle. You must use it if you want it to grow stronger. When you first start playing Overwatch, you will make mistakes. You will likely be scolded in the chat mercilessly as though you did it on purpose. It's gonna hurt. Most players are so afraid of this dreadful experience that they actually give up their instincts and consequently their judgment. They rely on the words of others and pour hours into playstyles that don't actually suit them because they never actually took the time to figure that out. They allowed the backlash from their miserable teammates to destroy their enthusiasm for learning and experience. As a result, they end up having a miserable time, caught between hot takes on concepts they barely understand, and before long, they become miserable people, insufferable, passive-aggressive, ultra-sensitive, and downright delusional. They become a fragile, ticking time bomb of a person and gradually become more and more of a burden to other players from start to finish. They resent this grave they've dug for themselves and lash out even more, resorting to making several new accounts just to continue playing and being the same insufferable douche. What a genuinely horrible scenario. And I suspect that this captures more players than anyone would care to admit. Thankfully, even when it comes to these people, they can come back to the surface if they just accept that they aren't perfect and don't have to be. If they just embrace that there's always going to be something they can do better, they have a chance to shed that misery and resentment and embrace the ecstatic dance of fate that is not only Overwatch, but life itself. The magic of Overwatch is in the learning. The magic of life is in the learning. In order to learn, we must accept that we do not know, and that's okay. In fact, it's quite natural. This can be a difficult process on its own, but in the Big 2-6, it's countercultural, radical behavior to actually be open to learning. That has to change if we want so much as a hope of something other than mutually assured destruction. So why don't we start with the foundational basics? Why don't we start with ourselves? Why don't we reclaim the value and reverence of our unique experience? Do you have the courage to play this game with an open mind, with an open heart? Are you open to the knowledge of your failures and the gift of their application? Do you have the courage to be seen, to be judged, fairly or unfairly? Are you willing to recognize all the ways you've been blind and choose to do better? If so, you can begin the development of the muscle of judgment through experience. Every choice we make has the potential to become a habit, and every habit a lifestyle. If you make open experience your lifestyle, your sense of judgment will be near infallible. And if you don't believe me, try it in Overwatch for a week. And when that works, try it in life. You just might find that this game unfolds in your favor. You just might find it staggering how much your world expands beyond the empty void of blind obedience and obsession with the opinions of others. Watch how beautifully your natural intelligence blooms like a rose in that void. And don't forget what it took to reclaim it. One of our fellow humans might need it someday. I'll see you next week.